Her husband's smirk vanished when the courtroom doors swung open. The powerless wife simply smiled. "Your Honor," her father's voice boomed, "you've just insulted a CEO." Every head turned. Revenge was no longer a request. The air in courtroom 12B of the New York County Supreme Court was a carefully manufactured chill, a stark contrast to the oppressive August heat stewing the city outside. It smelled of lemon-scented polish, old paper, and a faint, metallic tang of anxiety. Elena Thorne Mason, though she'd be shedding the hyphenated half of that name soon, sat with a stillness that felt carved from marble. Her charcoal gray Valentino suit was armor, its precise lines a declaration of order against the chaos unfolding. The diamond studs in her ears were not for show, they were a quiet reminder of the empire she'd built, one line of code at a time. Across the polished oak expanse, her husband, David Mason, looked every inch the wronged party. His bespoke Tom Ford suit was impeccable, his posture one of pained dignity. His lawyer, Richard Colville, was a shark in pinstripes, known in Manhattan legal circles for his theatrical, scorched-earth tactics in high-net-worth divorces. Elena's own attorney, a competent and steady woman named Linda Shaw, had warned her about Colville's style. Seeing it in action was another thing entirely. "Your Honor," Colville began, his voice a sonorous baritone designed to fill spaces and imply unassailable truth. "What we are presenting today is not merely a petition for equitable distribution. It is, unfortunately, a plea for protection. Protection for marital assets from a pattern of reckless dissipation. And, most critically, protection for a young child from a parent whose instability poses a grave concern." Elena's fingernails, manicured a neutral shell pink, pressed into her own palm. Dissipation. Instability. The words were grenades, lobbed with casual precision. Chloe. He was bringing their 7-year-old daughter, Chloe, into this. The petitioner, Mr. David Mason, Colville continued, striding before Judge Walter Farnsworth, a man in his 60s with a perpetually skeptical expression, is a partner at a prestigious private equity firm. A stable, diligent provider. The respondent, however, he let the pause hang, turning to look at Elena not with accusation, but with what seemed like profound disappointment. Elena Thorne Mason is, admittedly, a creative force. The founder of Ether, a tech startup. A world of big ideas, big risks, and, as the evidence will show, shockingly big and irrational spending. Linda Shaw was on her feet. "Objection, Your Honor." Argumentative. Sustained. "Mr. Colville, stick to the facts as you present them," Judge Farnsworth intoned, peering over his glasses. His tone suggested the objection was a minor procedural hiccup. "Of course, Your Honor." Colville offered a thin, apologetic smile. "Let me present fact one." He gestured to a paralegal, who began distributing bound folders. "These are bank statements and credit card records from the joint accounts and from accounts held solely in the respondent's name over the past 36 months. Elena accepted her copy. A quick scan sent a jolt of ice through her veins. The statements were real, the account numbers, the institutions. But the transactions highlighted in neon yellow were a grotesque funhouse mirror of her life. There was a $45,000 charge to a boutique in Saint-Tropez from a summer she'd spent debugging a server crisis in their Soho office. A series of $10,000 withdrawals from ATMs in Macau, timed to a business trip she'd taken to a tech conference in San Francisco. A $200,000 wire transfer to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands, dated to the week she'd closed their Series B funding. "You'll see, Your Honor," Colville narrated, a relentless and senseless drain on resources. Nearly $80,000 on wellness retreats in Sedona. Over $120,000 in antique jewelry purchases from obscure vendors. The piece de resistance, he paused for effect. A single payment of $350,000 to a consultant listed as Horizon Holdings, which our investigation reveals to be a shell entity with no discernible business purpose. This, from the woman who claims to be the shrewd CEO of a burgeoning unicorn. Elena leaned toward Linda, her whisper a hissed gust. These are forgeries. Manipulations. The St. Tropez charge is from David buying a watch for himself. The Macau withdrawals were his boys' trip. The Cayman wire was his investment in that doomed surfwear brand. Horizon Holdings is his ghost company for his side deals. We know, Linda whispered back, her eyes fixed on Colville. We have the forensics. We have the digital trail. Our exhibits dismantle his, line by line. Just wait. But Colville wasn't finished. He called his first witness, Dr. Anya Petrova, a psychologist with a severe bun and an air of clinical detachment. Under Colville's gentle prompting, she painted a portrait of a woman on the edge. She spoke of manic spending sprees as a symptom of underlying bipolar disorder, of grandiose delusions of business success masking deep insecurity, of parental neglect driven by obsession with work. She cited shared concerns from the husband about erratic behavior, sleepless nights, and irrational anger directed at their daughter. Each word was a needle, sewing a tapestry of madness around Elena. She thought of the late nights Dr. Petrova referenced, nights spent soothing Chloe after a nightmare, not raging at her. The irrational anger was her confronting David about the mysterious, secretive phone calls that had begun over a year ago. The grandiose delusions were her presentation to the board, the one that secured the new round of funding he was now trying to loot. Your Honor, Colville said, his finale approaching. In light of this documented financial hemorrhage and the profound concerns for the child's welfare, we are seeking a temporary order granting Mr. Mason exclusive use of the marital residence and primary physical custody of Chloe. Furthermore, we seek the immediate freezing of all accounts held by Ether Innovations and the respondent's personal assets, and the appointment of a forensic accountant and a guardian ad litem to oversee all financial and parental decisions until this matter is fully resolved. We must protect what remains before it is all frittered away on another flight of fancy. It was a masterstroke. Not just going for money, but for control. For her home, her company, her child. To frame her as not just a bad wife, but a dangerous, unstable mother and an irresponsible fool. David's face was a mask of somber resolve, but Elena saw the ghost of a smile in his eyes. The look he used to give her when he thought he'd outmaneuvered her in an argument. Now it was their turn. Linda Shaw stood, calm and methodical. Your Honor, the respondent categorically denies these fabricated allegations. What Mr. Colville has presented is a curated fraud, a house of cards built on doctored documents and perjured testimony. We are prepared to demolish it. Our first exhibit is a report from Digital Veracity Labs, the foremost forensic accounting and digital security firm in the country. She handed the report to the clerk. This analysis, conducted on the original, unaltered financial data packets procured directly from the banks, not the printed statements Mr. Colville is waving around, shows clear evidence of digital tampering. The metadata on the PDFs he submitted indicates creation and alteration dates that post-date the transactions themselves. The Cayman wire, for example, was initiated from an IP address registered to Mr. Mason's private office. Colville waved a hand. Digital files can be manipulated by anyone, Your Honor. Our paper trail is clear. Linda didn't miss a beat. Then let's talk about the paper trail. Our Exhibit B. She presented another set of documents. These are the actual credit card statements, showing the true recipient of the St. Tropez charge. Le Montre d'Or, a watchmaker. And here is the receipt, signed by David Mason. The Macau ATM withdrawals. Correlated with hotel receipts and flight manifests showing Mr. Mason was there, while my client was at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. We have the badge scan logs. She moved to the heart of it. And Horizon Holdings, the supposed shell entity. Our Exhibit C is a complete corporate genealogy. It is registered to a holding company owned by David Mason's college roommate. It has received over $2 million in transfers from his separate accounts over the past 2 years, funds he never disclosed in his own financial affidavits. It's not a recipient of her dissipation, Your Honor. It's the vehicle for his hidden assets. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed over David's face. Colville's jaw tightened. Finally, Linda said, her voice gaining steel, regarding the psychological evaluation. We have submitted the respondent's complete medical history, which shows no diagnosis or treatment for any psychiatric condition. We have affidavits from 10 of her employees, her COO, her head of HR, and her daughter's teacher and pediatrician, all attesting to her stability, dedication, and exceptional competence as a mother and leader. We have also filed a motion to compel the notes from Dr. Petrova's single, 45-minute evaluation, an evaluation paid for by Mr. Mason and based solely on information he provided. She turned to face the judge. This is not a case about protecting a child or assets from an unstable woman. This is a case about a husband attempting a brazen, malicious takeover, using the court to launder his own financial misconduct and to punish his wife for her success. The courtroom was silent. Elena felt a fragile bloom of hope. The truth was there, clear, documented, and undeniable. Judge Farnsworth took the digital veracity report, glanced at it, and set it aside with a soft thud. He peered at the corporate genealogy, his expression unreadable. He looked from Linda's confident stance to Colville's calculated poise, then to David's manufactured grimace, and finally to Elena's composed, expectant face. He let out a long, weary sigh, the sigh of a man burdened by the petty dramas of the rich. "Counsel," he said, addressing Linda. "This is a classic," he said, she said, wrapped in a blizzard of paperwork. "You're asking me to believe there's a vast conspiracy here. Forgery, perjury, hidden assets." He picked up the thick stack of Colville's highlighted bank statements. "These are official documents from major financial institutions. The testimony of a licensed psychologist carries weight. Your digital reports," he shrugged. "Experts can be hired to say anything for a price. This Horizon company you've dug up, interesting, perhaps, but it's a side issue. The core petition before me concerns the demonstrated spending patterns and the welfare of a minor child." Linda was stunned. "Your Honor, with respect, the side issue is evidence of fraud on the court. The demonstrated patterns are demonstrably fake. Your objections are noted, Counselor," Farnsworth said, his voice growing cooler. "But I see two parents in a bitter dispute, and one has presented compelling, prima facie evidence of concerning behavior that could impact the child's environment and the preservation of the marital estate. Pending a full hearing, I must err on the side of caution." He adjusted his glasses. "I am granting the temporary orders as requested by Mr. Mason. Exclusive occupancy of the marital residence. Primary physical custody to the father. All corporate and personal accounts of the respondent are hereby frozen, effective immediately. A guardian ad litem and forensic accountant will be appointed by the end of the day." The gavel cracked down with a sound like a bone-breaking crack. It echoed in the sudden void of Elena's mind. The polished room seemed to tilt. David's composed mask slipped for a full second, revealing a blaze of triumphant, unadulterated victory. Colville gave a slight, professional nod. "Your Honor, this is a travesty." Linda protested, but her voice sounded distant, muffled. "Ms. Shaw, the order stands. You can challenge it at the full hearing in 90 days. Next case. 90 days. 90 days for David to solidify his narrative, to spin his webs unchallenged, to turn her company into a carcass and turn her own daughter against her. 90 days while she was locked out of her home, her life, her work, branded a crazy woman by the court. The chill of the room finally penetrated her armor. It wasn't the chill of air conditioning. It was the cold of profound injustice, of a system that could so easily be gamed by a handsome face, forged paper, and a well-rehearsed lie. The marble stillness within her didn't crack, it deepened, hardening into something new, something infinitely colder and more determined. She had played by the rules, presented the truth, and the rules had been used as a cudgel against her. As the bailiff motioned for them to leave, David leaned across the table, his whisper meant only for her. "You should have taken the first settlement offer, Elena. All that, quiet power, looks pretty silent now." He turned and walked away, following his shark of a lawyer. Elena watched him go, the ice in her veins now a glacial flow. She picked up her slim Prada briefcase, the only asset not yet frozen. "Linda," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, devoid of the tremor she felt in her soul. Cancel all my afternoon meetings. Elena, I'm so sorry. We'll appeal, we'll. No, Elena interrupted, her eyes fixed on the now empty doorway where her husband had vanished. There's someone I need to see. The game was far from over. The first round had gone to David. But he had made one catastrophic, arrogant mistake. He had forgotten who her father was. And he had forgotten that James Thorne didn't believe in playing by rules that were rigged. The walk from the courthouse to the curb was a perp walk through a world gone malevolent. The familiar granite and glass of lower Manhattan seemed to leer at her, every reflective surface a reminder of her new, court-ordered status, unfit, reckless, a danger. A uniformed court officer had physically escorted her to a side exit, a courtesy, he'd muttered, to avoid the press David's team had undoubtedly tipped off. The humiliation was surgical, precise. Her driver, Leo, was waiting exactly where she'd texted him from the silenced phone in the courtroom anteroom. His usual warm, crinkly-eyed greeting died on his lips as he saw her face. He simply nodded, opened the door of the black SUV, and said, "Where to, Miss Thorne?" The use of her maiden name, instinctual for him after a decade of service, was a small, profound comfort. "The St. Regis," she said, her voice flat. "Use the service entrance." As the car pulled into the snarl of Broadway traffic, the legal machinery Judge Farnsworth had set in motion began its grinding work. Her phone, still in her hand, lit up not with calls, but with a cascade of automated alerts. Emails from her bank, account frozen per court order NYSC 12245. A text from Martin, her COO, a string of panicked words. "Elena, police are here with the order they're locking down servers, access revoked, what is happening?" Another from Amara, her head of HR, court-appointed accountant just arrived with security. "They're seizing all financial records. They're telling staff you've been removed pending investigation." Each notification was a suture stitching the narrative of her instability into the fabric of her reality. But it was the next text that turned the ice in her veins to a splintering pain. It was from the nanny, Sophia, a woman Elena trusted implicitly. "Ms. Elena. Mr. Mason came to the school. He had papers. He took Chloe. He said you are not allowed to see her. Chloe was crying. He wouldn't let me comfort her. I am so sorry." A sound escaped Elena then, a sharp, inhaled gasp that was the physical manifestation of a heart cracking. She stared at the words until they blurred. He took Chloe. Not picked up, took. Like property. Like spoils. The image of her daughter, confused and tearful, being led away from her school, from her life, by the father who had just perjured himself to paint her mother as a monster, was an agony beyond any legal defeat. Leo's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, heavy with a grief that wasn't his to bear. "Miss Thorne. Just drive, Leo." They arrived at the St. Regis. The discreet service entrance led to a small, gilt elevator that whisked her up to the Astor Suite. Linda Shaw was already there, pacing before a panoramic view of Central Park, her briefcase spilling documents onto a Louis XVI desk. "I've already filed the notice of appeal," Linda said, her voice tight with fury. "But it's a slog, Elena. Farnsworth's orders will stand for weeks, maybe the full 90 days. The guardian ad litem will be some overworked social worker who'll only see the court file. The forensic accountant will be crawling through Ether's books, scaring off clients, tanking our valuation. David's playing a deep game. He doesn't just want money, he wants to break your company so he can claim it was always a failing fantasy, and take full custody in the chaos." Elena walked to the window, not seeing the verdant park below. She saw Chloe's room in there, his townhouse now. Would he pack away her stuffed animals? Tell her mommy was sick? The systematic dismantling of her life was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Her home, her child, her life's work. All locked away under the imprimatur of the New York Supreme Court. "We need to fight this in the press," Linda urged. A statement. "Your version. We exposed the forgeries, He took Chloe. He said you are not allowed to see her. Chloe was crying. He wouldn't let me comfort her. I am so sorry." A sound escaped Elena then, a sharp, inhaled gasp that was the physical manifestation of a heart cracking. She stared at the words until they blurred. He took Chloe. Not picked up. Took. Like property. Like spoils. The image of her daughter, confused and tearful, being led away from her school, from her life, by the father who had just perjured himself to paint her mother as a monster, was an agony beyond any legal defeat. Leo's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, heavy with a grief that wasn't his to bear. Miss Thorne. Just drive, Leo. They arrived at the St. Regis. The discreet service entrance led to a small, gilt elevator that whisked her up to the Astor Suite. Linda Shaw was already there, pacing before a panoramic view of Central Park, her briefcase spilling documents onto a Louis XVI desk. I've already filed the notice of appeal, Linda said, her voice tight with fury. But it's a slog, Elena. Farnsworth's orders will stand for weeks, maybe the full 90 days. The guardian ad litem will be some overworked social worker who'll only see the court file. The forensic accountant will be crawling through Ether's books, scaring off clients, tanking our valuation. David's playing a deep game. He doesn't just want money, he wants to break your company so he can claim it was always a failing fantasy, and take full custody in the chaos. Elena walked to the window, not seeing the verdant park below. She saw Chloe's room in there, his townhouse now. Would he pack away her stuffed animals? Tell her mommy was sick. The systematic dismantling of her life was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Her home, her child, her life's work. All locked away under the imprimatur of the New York Supreme Court. We need to fight this in the press, Linda urged. A statement. Your version. We expose the forgeries, I want to speak with her. Now. A low chuckle. The judge was very clear about your instability being a risk. Phone calls can be agitating. For everyone. Maybe in a few weeks, on the Guardian ad litem assesses the situation. David, she is 7. She needs to hear my voice. She needs to know I'm okay. But are you okay, Elena? He asked, his tone full concerned. The things in those bank statements, the psychologist's testimony, it's a lot for a child to process. It's better this way. Clean. She'll adjust. Kids are resilient. The sheer, gaslighting cruelty of it stole her breath. He was using the court's lie to perpetuate the isolation, to sever the bond. He was rewriting reality, with Chloe as his captive audience. You listen to me, Elena said, the steel finally entering her voice. This is not over. Isn't it? The sneer was audible now, the mask of the pained husband fully gone, revealing the petty, vindictive man beneath. You had your chance with your fancy lawyers and your forensic reports. The judge saw through it. Everyone will. The powerful Elena Thorne, brought low by her own demons. It's a better story, don't you think? Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm taking Chloe for ice cream. To celebrate our new beginning. The line went dead. Elena stood holding the burner phone, the plastic casing creaking under the pressure of her grip. The image was weaponized, her terrified daughter, being given ice cream by the man who had just destroyed her mother, told to be happy about it. Linda was watching her, her face pale. Elena. Elena carefully set the phone down on the desk. She straightened the sleeves of her Valentino jacket, a minute, controlled gesture. The hurricane behind the glass raged, howling with a mother's fury. But the glass held. He thinks power is about taking things, Elena said, her voice so calm it was terrifying. Houses. Companies. Children. He thinks because he has a piece of paper from a cynical old man, he's won. She turned to Linda. And in her eyes was a light so cold and resolved it was like staring into a glacier. He's mistaken. True power isn't in the taking. It's in the choice to remain standing when they've done their worst. And it's in knowing who to call when it's time to stop playing defense. She picked up the hotel's landline phone, its weight solid in her hand. Get me everything you can on the Guardian ad litem and the forensic accountant. Every ruling, every professional association, every hint of bias. And clear your schedule for tomorrow morning. Why? Linda asked. Because, Elena said, the ghost of that icy smile returning, we're going to pay a visit to my father. And David Mason is about to learn the hard way that the most dangerous enemy is the one you never saw coming, because you were too arrogant to look. The Astor Suite was now a war room. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the chaos of legal pads, financial printouts, and empty coffee cups. Elena had not slept. She had paced, strategized, and painstakingly reviewed the dossier Linda had assembled overnight on the court-appointed officers. The guardian ad litem, a Ms. Harriet Vance, had a reputation for favoring the status quo parent, usually the one with physical custody. The forensic accountant, a man from a firm with known ties to Richard Colville's law partnership, was a shark in a cardigan. It was all predictable, part of the machine. Elena was done with the machine. At 7 a.m. precisely, the penthouse elevator chimed. Leo had been stationed downstairs. The message was simple: he's here. James Thorne did not enter a room, he occupied it. At 72, he carried the leonine grace of a retired predator, his tall frame still imposing in a flawlessly tailored but understated navy suit. His hair was a swept-back mane of silver white, his face a topography of sharp angles and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He was not a man of loud pronouncements. His power resided in a profound, unnerving stillness. He was the calm at the eye of the storm, and fortunes rose and fell based on where he turned his gaze. He took in the scene, the evidence of a sleepless night, the tension in his daughter's shoulders, and his expression did not change. He simply walked to her, placed his hands on her arms, and looked into her eyes. No hug, no platitudes. A silent assessment. They took Chloe, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper, the words containing multitudes of pain. I know, he replied. 2 words, but in them was a universe of understanding and a promise of reckoning. He turned to Linda, who stood almost at attention. Counselor. The brief, please. For the next hour, Linda walked him through the legal ambush. James Thorne listened without interruption, his eyes fixed on the documents as she spoke. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Farnsworth, he said, the name a distasteful note on his tongue. A bureaucrat in a robe. He believes in paperwork over truth. He is afraid of being reversed, so he makes safe rulings that uphold the loudest, most credentialed narrative in front of him. He tapped the fake bank statements. Colville gave him a simple story. You gave him a complex truth. He chose simple. He turned his glacier blue eyes to Elena. You appealed to a judge. That was your first mistake. What was my second? Elena asked, her chin lifted. Believing you had to fight this as David's wife, he said quietly. You are not David Mason's wife. You are Elena Thorne, CEO of Ether, a company in which I hold a controlling interest through the Thorne Family Trust. This, he gestured to the legal morass, is not a divorce. It is a hostile takeover attempt of a major asset in my portfolio, facilitated by fraud and the corruption of the judicial process. We will reframe the battlefield. He began issuing instructions, his voice calm, surgical. Linda, you will amend all filings. Change the caption. It is no longer Mason versus Mason. It is the Thorne Family Trust v. David Mason and Richard Colville. We are suing them for tortious interference, fraud, and defamation. We are not asking for custody, we are exposing a conspiracy to kidnap a child for financial leverage. Linda's eyes widened. The legal hurdles, the jurisdictional. Overcome them, James said, with a finality that brooked no argument. Next. We are not waiting for the guardian ad litem. We are hiring our own, Dr. Eleanor Reed. He named the most respected, famously impartial child psychologist in the country. We will petition the court to have her appointed jointly, funded by us. If Farnsworth denies it, we take it to the press with that fact alone. We also hire our own forensic team, not an accountant, a former SEC fraud investigator. We mirror their every move, but with 10 times the resources and credibility. He turned to Elena. You will not call David again. You will not beg for access. You will, however, go to Chloe's school today. At dismissal. Be visible. Be calm. Be the mother you are. Let them call the police. Let them make a scene. I want footage of David Mason using the courts to keep a loving mother from her child at a school gate. The court of public opinion opens before the court of appeals. It was a masterclass in escalation. He was not playing David's game on David's terms. He was changing the game entirely, raising the stakes to a level where David's forgeries and Colville's theatrics would look like cheap, dangerous toys. "And you?" Elena asked. A flicker of something cold passed behind his eyes. "I will pay a visit to Judge Farnsworth. In his chambers. Not as a litigant. As a concerned citizen and a major donor to the court's Technology Modernization Fund." He stood, smoothing his jacket. "The hearing to confirm the temporary orders is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Be ready." The following morning, the atmosphere in courtroom 12B was different. The chill was still there, but it was charged, anticipatory. David and Colville sat at their table, a study in confident preparation. They had won the first round decisively, today was about making it permanent. David glanced at Elena, who sat with Linda, her posture unchanged, poised, quiet. He saw only the silence he'd mistaken for defeat. Judge Farnsworth took the bench, looking even more weary than before. "Counsel, we are here on the petitioner's motion to make the temporary orders permanent pending trial. Mr. Colville." Colville rose, ready to deliver the coup de grace. "Thank you, Your Honor. As the court has seen, the evidence of financial recklessness and emotional instability is overwhelming. In the interest of the child's safety and the preservation of assets, we believe the temporary orders must be made permanent to prevent further irreparable harm. We have affidavits from the guardian ad litem, Ms. Vance, who notes the child is adjusting to her new, more stable environment, and from the forensic accountant, who has already identified several anomalies in Ether's books that warrant deeper investigation." He was mid-sentence, building to his crescendo, when the heavy, 12-foot oak doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open. It was a sound that rarely occurred during proceedings. All heads, including Judge Farnsworth's, swiveled. James Thorne stood in the doorway. He did not stride, he did not hurry. He simply entered, his presence an immediate, gravitational force. The whispered recognition was instantaneous, a rustle of expensive fabric as several lawyers in the gallery straightened. This was not a celebrity, this was capital incarnate, a man whose name was on hospital wings and business school libraries, whose quiet word could greenlight or bury billion-dollar deals. His gaze swept the room, passed over a suddenly frozen David, over a confused Colville, and landed on Judge Farnsworth for a brief, piercing moment. Then he walked, with a measured, unhurried pace, down the central aisle. He did not look at the gallery. He did not acknowledge the bailiff who moved instinctively, then stopped, uncertain. He reached Elena's table. Linda Shaw, wide-eyed, immediately stood and offered her chair. James Thorne gave a slight, courteous nod and took the seat beside his daughter. He did not touch her, did not whisper. He simply placed his hands on the table, lacing his fingers together, and looked forward at the judge, his expression one of polite, expectant attention. He was not there as a father offering comfort. He was there as the chairman of the board, the controlling shareholder, taking his rightful place at the table where the fate of a critical asset was being decided. The silence was absolute, profound. The air had been sucked from the room. Colville's carefully constructed argument died in his throat. David Mason's face underwent a terrifying transformation, the smug confidence draining away, replaced by a dawning, horrific comprehension. He hadn't just been fighting his wife. He'd been trying to loot a company owned by James Thorne. He had used the court to kidnap James Thorne's granddaughter. Judge Farnsworth stared, his mouth slightly ajar. The name Thorne had clearly taken on a new, terrifying dimension since their private meeting in chambers. He looked from James's impassive face to the stack of new, amended filings Linda had just submitted that morning, the ones now bearing the caption "The Thorne Family Trust v. David Mason." The gavel, which had been so decisive days before, now rested limply in his hand. The entire narrative of the case had just been obliterated. The powerless wife was gone. In her place sat an heiress and CEO, with her empire's most formidable guardian now occupying the seat of power beside her, ready to play a game for which David and Colville had no rulebook. The balance of power in the room hadn't just shifted. It had been utterly overthrown. The silence in the courtroom was no longer mere quiet, it was a pressurized void, waiting to be filled by the only man with the authority to break it. Judge Farnsworth's eyes darted from James Thorne's impassive face to the amended complaint now sitting before him like a live grenade. He cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound. "Mr. Thorne, this is highly irregular. You are not counsel of record." James Thorne did not stand. He merely inclined his head, a fractional gesture of acknowledgement that carried the weight of a sovereign. "No, Your Honor. I am the chairman of the Board of Ether Innovations, the majority stakeholder through the Thorne Family Trust. Given that this proceeding has escalated from a domestic dispute to a targeted attack on a major corporate entity under my stewardship, my presence is not only regular, it is requisite." His voice was not loud, but it was a scalpel, precise and cold, cutting through the procedural fog. "I am here to ensure the court is no longer operating on a fraudulent prospectus." Richard Colville found his voice, though it had lost its sonorous confidence. "Objection, Your Honor. This is theatrics. An attempt to intimidate this court and distract from the respondent's documented issues." James's gaze slid to Colville, a look so devoid of personal animosity it was somehow more terrifying. "Mr. Colville, you entered into evidence Exhibit 7B, the bank statement showing the Cayman Islands wire transfer, correct?" "I did," Colville snapped, rallying. "Evidence of my client's wife's reckless dissipation." "Indeed." James reached into the slim, crocodile leather portfolio on the table. He withdrew a single sheet of paper. "This is a certified transaction log from Interpol's Financial Intelligence Unit, obtained through mutual legal assistance. It traces the routing number from your Exhibit 7B. It did not terminate in the Cayman Islands. It originated there. From an account held by Horizon Holdings." He paused, letting the reversal settle. "The money flowed to my daughter's account, not from it. It was a deliberate seed, planted to be discovered as proof of her spending. A fabricated liability." He placed the page on the table. "You dismissed our Exhibit C, Your Honor. The corporate genealogy. You called it a side issue." James's voice dropped, becoming dangerously soft. "That audit trail didn't just show Mr. Mason's ownership. It showed the money trail from that Horizon account to a shell corporation in Delaware, which paid for the expert services of one Dr. Anya Petrova, and which, in the past month, made 3 substantial payments to a legal defense fund for judges facing ethical inquiries." He didn't look at Farnsworth. He didn't need to. The judge had gone the color of old parchment. "This," James continued, sliding a thicker, bound dossier toward the bench, "is a dossier compiled by my security team and former federal investigators. It contains evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud on this court, subornation of perjury, and witness tampering. It includes sworn affidavits from bank officials confirming the doctoring of statements, and digital forensic evidence showing the fabrication was orchestrated from Mr. Mason's office. It suggests a coordinated effort to illegally seize control of a company valued at $900 million, using this court as its unwitting instrument." David Mason made a small, choked sound. His knuckles were white where he gripped the table. The triumphant architecture of his plan was visibly crumbling, brick by brick, in the public square. James finally turned his full attention to Judge Farnsworth. The room held its breath. "Your Honor, you have a choice. You can continue down the path your initial, perhaps understandable, error has set. Or you can immediately vacate all temporary orders, dismiss the guardian ad litem and forensic accountant of dubious provenance, and refer this matter, and this dossier, to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation. The former path leads to a spectacle that will consume your court and your reputation. The latter is the only path that leads to justice." The unspoken threat hung in the air, cleaner and more devastating than any outburst. It was the promise of a war James Thorne would not lose, fought in the press, in appellate courts, and in the halls of judicial oversight. Farnsworth looked broken. The cynical bureaucrat was gone, replaced by a man who suddenly saw the precipice. He swallowed, his gavel trembling slightly. The court finds the new evidence compelling. Upon preliminary review, it appears a grave miscarriage may be in progress." His words were ash. The temporary orders of this court are hereby vacated, effective immediately. Physical custody of the minor child, Chloe Mason, is restored to the respondent, Elena Thorne Mason. All asset freezes are dissolved. The appointments of the guardian ad litem and forensic accountant are rescinded. He couldn't even look at David or Colville. This matter is stayed pending a review pending a criminal referral. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell with a weak, hollow tap. In the ringing silence that followed, David Mason seemed to deflate, his body collapsing in on itself. Colville was already whispering frantically, damage control mode activated far too late. Elena did not look at them. She had eyes only for her father, who gave her the barest nod. Then, she stood. She smoothed her suit jacket, a queen reclaiming her realm. She walked around the table and stopped directly in front of her ex-husband. He couldn't meet her eyes. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear, calm, and carried to every corner of the dead silent room. It was not a shout. It was a verdict. Now, Elena said, her gaze icy and absolute, let's discuss my terms. You will leave our home by sundown. You will sign over full, uncontested custody. You will forfeit any claim to ether. And you will repay every cent you stole through Horizon, with interest. If you do not, we will not be returning to this courtroom. We will be seeing you in criminal court. And I will ensure Chloe understands exactly what her father tried to do. She turned and walked away, James Thorne falling into step beside her. They left without a backward glance, the heavy courtroom doors swinging shut behind them on a scene of utter ruin. The fallen rose had not just risen, she had grown thorns of steel, and the story was no longer about her heartbreak. It was about his annihilation. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe for more stories from Broken Vows.